How do you make a soft and sweet, sugar-free pectin gummy?
Well, today on WTF, we're going to show you how to make a perfect pectin gummy using amidated low-methoxyl pectin. Hello and welcome to WTF, where we transform food here in the Modernist Pantry Test Kitchen. I'm Chef Scott Guerin.
And I'm Janie, one of the owners of Modernist Pantry. And here on WTF every week we talk about unique ingredients and techniques and show you new recipes for your kitchen. So remember to subscribe and you'll get notified of our episodes when they come out. Today we are doing probably one of our most requested recipes, which is how do you make a sugar-free gummy? And this one, we've been doing a bunch of different gummy episodes. You can check them out, links in the description below. And it's a constant comment. How do I make this sugar-free? Can I just take out the sugar in this pectin gummy? Can I take it out in this gummy and just replace it with anything else? And the answer is always no. But today we want to talk about why it's a no, and also how do you make a sugar-free gummy? So I think, Scott, maybe where we can start with is how is a sugar-free gummy different from, like a pectin gummy or a gelatin gummy? What makes it so challenging?
So this is a pectin gummy. So this is a sugar-free and plant-based gummy. And one thing we wanted to do is be able to find a way that we can make it and have it have like a good bit of chew and really consistent. And that seems to be pretty difficult to do. So we found a way to do it with low-methoxyl amidated pectin. So that will allow you for a really great chewy gummy. And it's completely sugar-free. Yeah, and I know not a lot of people have worked with the amidated LMA Pectin before, but a lot of people have worked with the HM Pectin. And can HM Pectin, either the rapid set or slow set, be substituted in this recipe? No, since this doesn't have high sugar content, this is all done with sugar substitutes that HM Pectin would not work. Okay. So that's a completely different recipe. This is based off that recipe, but converted to be sugar-free. So yeah, you would not be able to add HM Pectin to this. Stick to the amidated low-methoxyl pectin, that or LMA Pectin, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, stick with that, and that's going to be the best because it only requires a small amount of calcium. You don't have to worry about if it's mismeasured because it requires just such a small amount that it will gel and it will stay gelled and it'll be nice and chewy in the end. Yeah, let's, I guess we can maybe start with the demo. And as we're talking, I know one of the questions people have is why is it such a challenge to make it chewy? Yeah, so especially when you're doing it with sugar substitutes, you're going to run into issues. So I have my first little mixture here. Both of the sugar substitutes that we're adding are mixed together. It is 70% sorbitol and 30% xylitol. We found that gave us a really good consistent sweetness. Sometimes sugar alcohols can have, they're not sugar, so they have their own flavor, right? But when they're mixed together, these are super consistent. They just taste like a regular gummy. So this is the best, and it allowed us for that tacky, almost chew that we get, right, that we want. These are not, gummy bear style, like very, very, very chewy, but these are chewy and almost like gumdrop texture. So I have this here, and I'm going to dry mix it with my LMA Pectin, my low-methoxyl amidated pectin. And in doing this, I'm just going to make sure that I'm not going to worry about clumps because that would be bad. So yeah. And of course, I'm sure someone out there is like, "What about allulose? What about isomalt? Can I do it? Can I do it with the other sugar substitutes instead of this sorbitol xylitol blend?" So great question. We tried it with isomalt, and the isomalt was too firm, and not in a pleasant way, right? It was too firm and almost like ripping your teeth out. Right, like a hard candy. Yeah. But just not, it was too chewy, too firm. Like it never got to that point that it was a positive experience to eat. So this is where we found it was really good. And if you tried it with allulose, two things would happen. It would brown extremely quickly because when it's mixed with anything, it browns. But it also does not recrystallize once it's hydrated. So if it doesn't recrystallize, you're never going to get that texture. It's always going to be kind of wet, right? So we have this here, and I'm going to add my water to my pan. This is on just barely on. It's at 90 degrees, so it's not 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm just going to gently stir this and sprinkle this in. This is the first part. I just want to hydrate my pectin. I don't want to end up with a lot of clumps, right? So mixing this in is going to give me nice. You can do this in a blender. You can do it with a hand blender, but some people don't want to break out all the extra equipment for it. You just do it with a whisk.
Yeah, and can you talk a little bit more about why is that dry blend that you just did so important when you're working with hydrocolloids?
So basically you're separating the little bits of LMA pectin here, and by separating them, dispersing them within all of the sugar substitutes, you're making it harder for them to clump into basically little balls. And when that happens, you don't get the full gelling effect. So I'm going to hydrate this now. The reason why we're doing this part where we hydrate it early before we add the rest of our sugar substitutes is that we want to hydrate it in the most amount of water possible so that it fully hydrates. Then I can add in my sugar. Then we can cook it up to the high temp. Because if I try to mix it all together, it may not fully hydrate just because this is also taking up water. Right?
Yeah, and the hydration temp, for people who are not familiar with it, is it boiling? What are we hydrating it up to?
It's boiling. So it does slightly thicken. It will slightly thicken just because it's being added to water, but really bring it up to a boil, and it comes up to a boil so quick that it's not a long process. And just mix this up, make sure it's completely heated all the way through. You're good to go. Don't make a mess. So once this comes up to a boil, I can basically just dump this directly in. And this is the rest of my sugar substitutes for the recipe. So this brought up to a full simmer. I'm going to add in the rest here. And this is going to look very thick. And a lot of people would say, oh, this is too much sugar. This is not going to work. But as it cooks, it will thin out and it will become very thin, not viscous. So mix this up here. So this looks too thick. Like this doesn't look like it's going to work. But it will once it comes up past the boil, because a good thing about LMA pectin is that it is thermoreversible, and what that means is that it can be heated and it can be brought back to a liquid form. So even with this recipe, it's a little bit nicer that I can, if I'm mixing it up at the end and it looks a little clumpy, I can crank up the heat, mix it in very well, and then get it into I generally like to mold it in a large mold and cut it into our shapes. That's the easiest way.
Yeah.
Just because once that calcium's added, it starts creating that gel immediately.
Yeah, so while this is coming up to temperature, you just brought up a great point, which is, molding. And I know when we were talking about the process of getting to these particular gummies, you said, like molding was a real challenge, and I know you were struggling with it. Can you talk more about, especially because a lot of people, we find when they call in, they're also struggling with molding too. What is so hard about the molding?
So generally what we're doing is we're working in a normal kitchen setting. We're not working in a commercial setting. And in a commercial setting, there's depositors and there's heated depositors and a lot of these things that people add or use, and they also use different types of molds, cornstarch molds, all sorts of things like that we sometimes don't have the ability to have in our homes or our restaurant kitchens, or even sometimes in our commercial kitchens. So this is going to be the best way that you're going to be able to make a consistent sized gummy, because all you have to do is make sure it's flat when it goes into its mold. Right here, we're just going to use a bowl just so you can kind of see how it looks. But if you're going to put it into a silicone mold, you know how thick it is. If you cut it to a certain dimension, you're going to get a specific weight of gummy and things like that. So that's going to be the best way. It cuts very easily. It takes a little bit of pressure, but that just means it's a chewier gummy, right?
Yeah, and why is it so hard when people try to pour something like this into little individual gummy bear molds?
So you'll see when I finish this recipe, it's going to set very quickly. So I even, like I said, I can crank it up and make sure that it's a little looser, but I can't stand over individual gummy bear molds and make sure that they are all full before I get a fully set gum, sitting in the bottom of my pan.
Right.
So I'm going to let this cook just for a little bit. It's at around 230 now. This is something that we need to talk about, because usually if I was doing this with sugar, 240 is going to be perfect.
Okay.
That's Fahrenheit, right? So 240 is going to be perfect for sugar, but we're not dealing with sugar. We're dealing with two different types of sugar substitutes. So if I cook this to 240, it is too soft.
Okay.
And in return, when it's too soft, it won't feel like a gummy. It'll feel like a pectin. It also, when you mix it with, so I like to put sorbitol on the outside, which really keeps any moisture from coming out.
Okay.
It will shrivel up, right? Because it absorbs the moisture, but it doesn't get wet. So it'll shrivel up. It'll look very unappealing, right? So I bring this recipe between 250 and 255. It doesn't have to be exact. Obviously, a little bit firmer at 255, but 250 works great. I'm getting all the steam right now. But yeah, so this just needs to come up. It'll go slow once it hits that 230. It needs to get out all the moisture as you're seeing here, and then the sugar substitutes will cook, and we'll be able to add in our last bit of ingredients.
Okay.
So I can actually show now. So I have a little bit of water here, and I'm going to mix together these two. This is my calcium, so this is calcium lactate gluconate, completely flavorless calcium. And just a little bit of citric acid. You don't want to overload this with citric acid because if you overload it with citric acid, it'll weaken the gel.
Interesting.
So just enough to give us a little bit of, it's a gummy. We want to have that little kind of like, acidity to it. Can you put it on the outside of the gums? Yes. Citric acid loves moisture, and it'll pull it out, and it can get very wet on the outside. So there's just a little bit of water. My spoon. So just move it up a little bit. I'm going to sprinkle this over the top.
Yeah, and if you're wondering about the ratios used in today's recipes, as always, the link will be in the description below, and you can get all that information. And also check out our YouTube short later this week, which is going to kind of do, a faster, more thorough version of this demo.
Yeah, this is basically the whole recipe, but we'll show you the cutting and everything like that. And one thing that's good about mixing the calcium lactate gluconate with the citric acid is that mixing it in here, it dissolves almost immediately.
Right.
Whereas if I put in the calcium lactate, it can kind of clump up. It will eventually dissolve on its own, but it just makes it a little bit quicker.
Okay.
So as you can see now, we're literally at 250 and all that moisture is completely gone.
Yep.
So this is perfect time. First thing we want to add is our flavor. So right here we're using flavor drops. Right, this is an amazing product that we have. This is a blueberry. We have tons of different flavors. If you want to flavor a gummy in some fun different flavors, this is the best way to do it. But we're going to do blueberry because we have peach, we have a watermelon, we have a green apple, blueberry. Right.
And does it matter if that flavor is, right now, is it alcohol-based or oil-based?
This one is the alcohol-based, but oil-based works as well. Some of these are oil, some of them are alcohol, so they all work. I'm not going to stir this just yet. I'm going to put in a few drops of blue food coloring, optional, right? There's a little bit of color. So I'm going to mix this up now. So blue. We'd always do blue raspberry. You can do whatever you'd like for these.
That blueberry flavor is so concentrated. It is like this wave of blueberry.
So I'm going to turn this off.
Smells great.
Because the pan has enough thermal energy to continue heating it. So this was at about 255 or 252. It'll eventually come up to 255. So. And once I add this, it'll pretty much be ready to go. Okay. So I'm going to stir this very quickly because I want to get that calcium mixed in as fast as possible. So there goes the water in it, right? And if you don't mix this enough, you're going to end up with some gels that are soft and some gels that are firm, right?
And you can kind of quickly see how it's already starting
to gel.
Yep.
So if you're really good at molding, at this point you probably could get it into a few molds, but I like to pour it because you can definitely see.
But not like, 50 individual gummy bears.
So that citric acid's in there. And this basically could either go into a water bath, like an ice water bath, and it'll immediately set, or if you wanted to, you can just pop it in the refrigerator, or you leave it out on the counter. It's going to set.
Okay.
So nothing I can do right now, but if I were trying to scoop it from the edge, it's pretty much starting to set completely.
Yep.
So there we go. So it's basically the basis of what to do. From here, I would unmold it from there, cut it into my dice, pretty much, that I have. If you wanted to punch it out, you absolutely could into.
Yeah, that's one way to get
I
shapes.
see some people do it with like fruit shapes and things like that. That's totally fine. It's just hard to gauge the weight on that.
Right.
But if you had a lot of this and you laid it out into a sheet, you could absolutely punch it into the fruit shapes that you want. So.
Very cool. All right, so we're going to taste test this. What flavors did you say that was again?
So we have green apple, we have a watermelon, and then we have a peach.
Okay.
So the peach is the orange.
All right. Okay, actually, before I bite into this, I keep forgetting about today's giveaway because I'm sure some people will be very excited to give this recipe a try.
You can hear how firm they are too. Like,
oh yeah.
Right? They're nice.
So in order to win this week's giveaway, which will be a set of these ingredients that you'll need to make sugar-free gummies, leave in the comments below another type of candy that you'd like to see us tackle here in the test kitchen. It's that easy. Leave it below in the comments and enter to win. All right. Which flavor did you get?
I got the watermelon.
I was just a peach.
Yep. So I like that the sorbitol on the outside kind of firms up the outside. Also, I like to leave them out at room temperature so you get a little extra chew from the outside.
Yep.
Nice and gumdroppy on the inside.
Yeah, this is really nice. Like I totally agree. So it's a little hard on the outside, but you get the give. There's like a little bit of it's not as bouncy as like a gelatin gummy, but you know, it definitely has texture. It's sweet enough. Obviously, it's sugar-free. So this is a really nice recipe. So if you are looking for a sugar-free pectin gummy, give this a shot and let us know what you think. So until next week, from here in the test kitchen, I'm Janie Way.
And I'm Scott Guerin.